we'll get our show started, but I figured that was such great timing with Bobby Brown. Sorry, no, BJ, the Chicago Kid, Women's World. Sorry about that. It's 11 o'clock or thereabouts. It's clicking within seconds of 11 a.m. here in Denver, Colorado. Good to be here with you. We're going to have a great show today on the air. But before I do that, let me make sure we talk a little bit about the power of streaming. We stream here at KUHS Denver every day, 7 days a week, giving you the best in programming as well as subjects and opinions about subjects that really make a difference, that give people an insight on what they can do for themselves to be the best that they can be. And one of those is us right here, Dr. Whiteman, bringing it to you at 360 Performance every Friday, 11 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. We are coming to you live and asking you to participate. Today we're going to have a couple of callers. We're going to have them calling in to us. We'll introduce them more formally when we get them on the air, but one of those is Razorback Dave and Austin Dunstan. Both have their own sports talk shows. We'll let them talk a little bit about that with us and share their insights. But today our theme is about the transfer portal. The transfer portal, and what that means is college athletes across all the sports, but especially for the major sports like football, they are able to transfer schools with less compromise. So we're going to be getting started here in just a second. All right, cranking it up at 11 o'clock. On a Friday, every Friday here at KUHSdenver.com. We're streaming to you live, 360 Performance. I'm your host, Dr. Whiteman. Coach is what I'm also known by because we talk about performance issues and how to coach people through the mental performance coaching process. That's what we do. If you want to reach out to me, contact me at 360mindset.com. That's my website. But every week before a show, we give you what I call a mindset moment. And this week's mindset moment was about integrity and satisfaction and giving insights to change and managing change. So here's the quote for this week. Mindset moment is, there is no greater satisfaction than to face unexpected change, adjust, and deliver beyond what is expected of you. So said yours truly, Dr. Whiteman. I came up with that quote a few years back when I was really looking closely at resiliency and what that really means to anybody's performance, whether you're an athlete, an executive, a housekeeper, whatever you do, a street sweeper, whatever it is that you do. Everybody has their own challenges and ways to become satisfied with their performance. And that came to mind when I was talking to one of my athletes, and I said, there is no greater satisfaction when you face unexpected change and you're able to adjust to it. And then with that adjustment, deliver beyond what you expect. That is just such a great feeling. And I said it with a personal reference because I felt that way on certain things that I've done. And I'm not trying to compare levels of greatness. What I'm trying to do is point out to you that you are in control of you. And that's what that quote is all about. And some of our show today will talk a little bit about being in control of you. And that's the transfer portal. We're going to talk a little bit about that and what it means to college athletes. But as we do every week for many weeks now, we talk about why are you grateful. So as I'm sharing with you why I'm grateful, I'm going to ask you to think about that for you and the people that are around you. So one of those items that I'm really grateful for is the opportunity to compete. I really enjoy the challenges of what's in front of me. How am I going to address it? Now, I would like to know a little bit about what's coming at me before it comes at me, but one of the excitements of being a competitor is that you never really know. It can come from any direction with any degree of force and accuracy, but you deal with it, right? And when you practice, you are practicing to try to predict, if you will, or anticipate the patterns of frequency of those challenges that come at you. But that whole process, that's an opportunity to compete. I love that. I'm so grateful for being able to have that in my life because of my health, because of my mental well-being, and the connections of both of those. So within that gratitude, it also points out that I try to adapt and adjust as best I can. I'm not always that good at it, but I try to prepare. I try to use my own failure and error to adjust how I do succeed in the future and the development of those stages towards success. So with today's show, I'm wondering what you all think about the transfer portal, because that has influenced and will influence going forward the ability for athletic programs to succeed, because they've opened the door with this transfer portal. There's kind of a pun there. A transfer portal, open the door. What it's going to do to the game, whatever that game is. It seems that football, since it's a major economic force in college football, is the one sport they emphasize a lot. But it's not just football. The transfer portal is available to all athletic sports under the NCAA purview. And the college athlete now has a straighter line on how to transfer from one school to the next without as much negative influences as they've had in the past. In the past, refreshing, some of you may have known this, if an athlete wanted to transfer, they had to go to their head coach, let them know that they wanted to transfer and why. Now, if you're a college person, a youngster, you're not necessarily all that confident about approaching your coach and asking them for their blessing. Well, they had to have it, and I'm not using the word out of context. That really is what it boiled down to, so that the athletic directors know that there's full, open, transparent communication as to the rationale and the reasoning for making this change. Now, I'm not saying that those rules don't still exist, but it's a straighter line and an easier path, and perhaps less humiliating and less nerve-wracking for the athlete to have to initiate that. But it allows an athlete who perhaps, and here's the examples we'll talk about today, like in Alabama, they get 5-star, 4-star, 3-star players in droves wanting to come to that program because of the success that program has. And Alabama is the only example I'm using. There's other teams like that. There's the Stanfords, the Michigans, the Ohio States, the Notre Dames, the ones that have had historically classic records of performance, both on and off the field, that these kids want to play for when they're thinking about it in high school. And they may be a legacy, maybe a parent or a relative was also part of that. So there's a lot of driving forces wanting these kids to follow the pursuit. But once they get there, that 5- and 4-star athlete gets to an Alabama program, they may sit because there's 2 or 3 5- and 4-star players ahead of them. And that they get a little bit disappointed because they are competitors. They love the opportunity, are grateful for the opportunity to compete. Now they don't get that chance. So they start thinking, where can I go? Well, prior to the transfer portal, it was a little bit arduous to make that happen. So and I'm sure that there were coaches, tapping them on the shoulder and talking to them about their opportunity and what they should be doing. So it was a little bit more resistance. So there's less negative consequences for making that transfer to another team. Well, with the transfer, now a team like, and I'll bet you Razorback Dave is going to talk about Arkansas when he calls in a few minutes, because Arkansas has some transfer portal players that came from other programs of very high regard, and they were high recruited players. So now Arkansas has that chance to have those players on their team and influence the overall performance of the team. My belief is that quality begets quality. So if I'm playing next to a high quality player and I maybe was a little uncertain about what I could do more, this player now comes in and challenges me to dip in deeper into myself and really discover more about who I am and execute at a greater level. So that competitive pressure within the team is also an opportunity. And that I believe is happening. We'll talk to Razorback Dave and Dustin Austin Dustin, when we have him call in today, Austin will be calling in at the half hour. Razorback Dave will be calling in at the quarter hour here just in a few minutes. But as we wait for that to happen, let me just keep kind of poking at this. We're gonna start off our discussion about the NCAA rankings, kind of as our outline for those teams that have risen up higher in the rankings versus in comparison to prior years where they're at. And there's a huge disparity in the rankings from prior years because maybe they got better talent, like with the transfer portal. Maybe they had better recruiting. Well, now they've got better recruiting and a transfer portal to build the talent pool within their team. So we're going to talk about parity. Is there parity across conferences and leagues? The SEC, for example, is not a lockdown for Alabama. I'm anticipating that Alabama might have a loss coming this year, even though people had predicted that Alabama may have another undefeated season, or teams that one would expect to win have not been winning. Like in the Big Ten, for example, people thought Wisconsin was going to have a better season start than they have. But that being said, there is a certain degree of parity across teams in conferences that you don't have as clear-cut decision-making about who's going to win the game. I know when I have two alma maters to my name. One is CSU on my PhD, and the other one is University of Iowa on my undergrad. And they played each other last week. And in the first half, CSU showed them they've got some talent and they've got some get after it and gumption, and really were competitive in that first half, forcing Iowa to dig a little deeper and be a little bit more respectful in their humility. And they came back and won the game, by an okay margin, not by no means a blowout, but it showed once again this quality of talent in the league across conferences, and so when there's plays that are happening between teams in different conferences, there's no slam dunk, and I think the bigger conferences, the power conferences, need to be aware of those differences so that we as fans can be entertained. We're going to talk a little bit about that as well. Has the entertainment value gone up because we're seeing more competition between an unlikely suspect and the preferred or anticipated winner? Not necessarily anymore an anticipated winner. So with that being said, and as a setup for today, let me also make sure that you get an idea what's going on this weekend. My alma mater, they got a Friday night game. NCAA has got some Friday night slots. There are 3 games going on tonight on ESPN, Fox Sport 1, and CBS Sports Network. On ESPN, we have Houston versus Tulsa, and then and that's at 7:30 p.m. And then at 8 p.m. By the way, I think these are all Eastern Standard Times. Iowa plays Maryland, the Terrapins, and that's in Maryland. You know what, Maryland's not been getting a lot of credit, but they're always scrappy. They're always competitors, and the coaches out there recruit well. So I'd expect that Iowa's going to have a challenge. They better come out expecting something from Maryland so they get themselves amped up to play. Another game that's really interesting is BYU at Utah State. That's a 9 o'clock Eastern Time game on CBS Sports Network. That could be, it's going to tilt towards BYU. They're ranked 13th on the NCAA polls, but Utah State they're still trying to find themselves, but they're a scrappy squad. And I tell you what, that stadium that they play in, I've been in that stadium. At this time of year, you can have a game with the weather that brings it down into the 30s, and the sun is shining. It's just a really interesting ecosystem in that part of the country. It's really kind of cool. It's always near and dear to my heart because they're going to play at the Merlin Olsen Field that's the Maverick Stadium. I'm old. I'm remembering so many things from my past when I was a kid. And then we open up on Saturday. Saturday's always a big day. some games of note in the Big Ten. I think there's going to be a battle between the two. Well, guess what? We've got a caller coming in. It's Razorback Dave. Good morning, sir. How are you? Razorback Dave is with us in the house. Can you hear me? I'm doing great. Let me turn up the volume in the studio here. Oh, wrong one. Wrong one. Talk to me, Dave. Yeah, I wanna see if I got the. Try it again. Talk at me. Talk at me again, Dave. There we go. I'm getting feedback. That's why I want to make sure I don't get feedback. Do. Try me again. All right, we got it. We're good. I'm loving it in the studio. Okay.
I'm glad it's not an airplane.
Yeah, it's I'm going to be more forward about this. Everybody, good morning again. We're on 360 Performance here, 11 o'clock Mountain Daylight Time, and we've got Razorback Dave on the line with us. And Dave, I want to remind everybody, we're talking about the transfer portal, and is it good for the game? Because you and I are going to focus a little bit on the top 25, and I was just finishing up kind of some schedule checks on who's playing who this weekend. And as you may already know, my Iowa Hawkeyes are playing the Maryland Terrapins tonight on Fox Sports 1. But one of the things I'm interested in, for the benefit of our audience, is do you see the parity changing, or is there parity?
I think you have to say, especially for the have-nots in college football, you definitely see it taking effect. Of course, you can't have a name like Razorback Dave without being skewed into what's happening at Arkansas, and I think that's a prime example. Sam Pittman brought 20 starters back from last year's team, which wasn't very good, but it was still light years from what they'd had before. So they're playing, when they play the drill, everyone that started on the defensive line last year that was leading that game at the half for Arkansas is playing backup to three guys that came in through the transfer portal. So the top three guys on Arkansas's defensive line, Trey Williams, John Ridgway, and Marcus Utley, I never did pronounce his name right, it's Utley. Those three guys are 1, 2, and 3 on the D-line, and then everybody else underneath them was, 11, 12 game starters for Arkansas last year, in a team that actually held Georgia in check for 3 quarters till they ran out of depth. So they're playing a three-man front against Texas A&M. This week they may play the full, but they're rotating 8 fresh guys with experience at that spot, and that couldn't happen without a transfer portal. Guys get some of their Arkansas running back, for example, Traylon Smith was at Arizona State, was recruited by the Arizona State head coach, came in, played a year, and then the coach got let go. He didn't get along with the new staff, started looking for somewhere to go. Thought Arkansas was a good fit, and he's our starting running back now. And I think you're probably seeing that all over the country, so that a team like Oregon can roll in and knock off Ohio State. A team like even Tulane can give Oklahoma a game, even though they probably shouldn't be in it. It just gives it, because what's been happening is these top 5, 6 schools, Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, Georgia, in some cases Texas, although not maybe in the last 4 or 5 years, those guys have been, go look at the recruiting classes, how they stacked up. Alabama's probably got 14 5-stars, and there's only 32 in each class. I didn't know this, but 5-stars are high school prospects that are expected to go in the first round of the NFL draft. So there's typically only 32 of them. And the 4 stars are guys that could go in the first 3 rounds. Well, if you look at all those schools that I just mentioned, their 4- and 5-star recruiting classes are just crazy. Well, now, those guys have been content with going into Alabama and sitting and waiting for their turn.
Yeah.
And now they don't have to do it, because they don't have to sit out with the sit-out rule gone. They don't have to wait. So, and that's why we went to scholarship limits back in the old days of Frank Rules and Darrell Rules. We went to scholarship limits because Bear Bryant was stacking players up like cordwood. He would recruit a player and give him a spot so that you couldn't get him, and you might not ever play him. I've seen Nick Saban do that as well.
Well, Dave, so you're
like
saying
the top running back in Arkansas.
You're saying there's parity
in Alabama.
You're saying there's parity not just for the benefit of the players transferring, but also there is some, because of the rule changes, coaches have got to change their behavior in how they recruit.
Absolutely.
In the recruit guidelines. Now, before I go too much further, Dave, give us everybody a shout out on what the show is that you produce and why you produce it. Your sports show is called what again?
My sports show is called Speaking Sports. It's really I like the term Common Fan because I'm familiar with another show called Common Fan, but it's just from the fans' view. Because I'm not a professional sports writer. I don't go out and attend all the press conferences, but I know how I feel about things. And it's just a chance to come on with some friends of mine, or you if you want to, not personally, but your listeners, if they want to come on, shoot us an email, speakingsports@outlook.com. You come on, be a guest, and we can talk sports in a talk show format without, I use so many national talk shows that are just, they follow the company line, or they just get so outrageous it's not even fun to listen to. This is just a basic, here's what's going on, this is what the common fan thinks about it, and we have a lot of fun doing it.
Well, Razorback Dave, give us the common fan prediction for the number 8 ranked Arkansas Razorbacks against the number 2 ranked Georgia Bulldogs.
In my professional opinion, and we should clarify that I'm not professional, but in my professional opinion, I think Arkansas should be able to play within 10 points of Georgia. At the most 2 scores. I think the 18.5 point spread, again, started at 19.5. It's down to 18.5 yesterday. I haven't looked at it today. I think that's way too many points for a team that should be as good as we all think they are now. My heart says we're going to go in there and beat them 28-24.
So, that was my next question for you, because, well, I'll ask it the question this way. What are the keys for Arkansas to deliver your prediction?
I think the keys for Arkansas are relatively simple. Texas A&M was leading the nation in team defense, scoring defense last year. Now they're not. Guess who's leading this week? Georgia. They're giving up some odd points per game, and Arkansas is scoring about 30, 35. I think it's going to come down to Arkansas's offensive line versus Georgia's defensive line. If Arkansas's offensive line can withstand them, they can continue to put the points up. I don't know if Georgia is going to score that many points on Arkansas. And there's still a buzz around that J.T. Daniels is hurt, injured, battling some kind of muscular thing, may not play. I think that's probably a lot of gamesmanship, but I don't think he's going to be 100%. If Arkansas can put pressure on Georgia with the 3-man front like they did A&M, anything can happen. But you're going to be sitting in front of 90,000 people in Georgia Stadium in Athens. It's going to be loud. It's going to be raucous. One thing they got going for them is an early kickoff, so they don't have to sit around the hotel all day waiting on something to go wrong. They can just get up and go to the ball field and play football. And usually favors the road team. I think you'd be shocked to know some of the numbers that Georgia has ranked in the 11 o'clock games. Georgia and Arkansas haven't met very many times. Typically, they've only met in bowl games or in the SEC championship games. I mean, Arkansas's never gotten a good end of that. It's a new day, though. And they're going to have a chance to win. I think that's really all they can ask for right now.
So, Dave, in your review of the top 25 NCAA teams going into week 6 after week 5, we've got the following list: Alabama number 1, Georgia 2, Oregon 3, Penn State 4, My Hawkeyes are 5, Oklahoma 6, Cincinnati 7, Arkansas 8, and Notre Dame is 9, with Florida coming up with number 10. Who of those 10, Dave, do you think has had the greatest jump because they deserved it, number one, but also because of the impact of, as you said with Arkansas, their lineup has benefited from transfer portal activity?
Well, I think it probably goes in. I'd have to say Arkansas has probably made the biggest jump. They weren't ranked preseason. I think every other team in the top 10 that I'm looking at everybody's top 10, including the Speaking Sports top 10 that we did, to which you contribute.
Yep.
There's nobody in the top 10 that didn't start the season in the top 25 except for Arkansas.
Yeah.
And Arkansas is there because they got a win over number 15 against Texas in week 2, and they got a win over number 7 A&M. Now, we still don't know how good preseason polls are, because and the other thing about Georgia is their only quality win is against Clemson, and they only beat them 10-3, and Clemson's horrible.
Yeah, and Clemson's dropped it yet, and yet stayed at 25. The other surprise for me, to your point, is Penn State, Oregon, and Florida. I think Florida may have the talent to be highly ranked in the top 10, but Penn State really was one of my Cinderella teams. I didn't expect them to be where they're at in the top 25 at this point in the season.
Well, that's true, and with maybe the exception of Oregon, Penn State, and Notre Dame, and those guys they're perennial powerhouses. People expect them to be good. TV hopes that they're good when the season starts, so they always creep into everybody's top 25 poll preseason. I can remember years ago, Texas used to come in 2, 3, 4 in the preseason every year and go 6-6 that season. And it was all for TV markets. But you look at a team like Oregon or your Iowa Hawkeyes, those guys, they're not a powerhouse. They're not a perennial powerhouse. They're a big name in their conference, but we haven't really talked about them in the top 10 habitually over the last 15 years. They're benefiting from it. Oregon's obviously benefiting from it. And look at the bottom of the top 25. Teams like Fresno State, Kentucky, Coastal Carolina, Cincinnati. I'm not even sure where Cincinnati's come from. They're top 10 in a lot of polls.
And add Wake Forest and Baylor in the bottom 25 of the 25 as well.
Wake Forest and Baylor. That's right.
Let me get your thoughts on a game combination this weekend. The Notre Dame-Cincinnati game, I think, could really bring some parity to Cincinnati's mindset. They may get their hats handed to them by Notre Dame because Notre Dame has a chip on their shoulder. What are your thoughts?
Well, that's what I call a bring-them-on-out game. Somebody right there is coming out of the top 10 when that game's over. And typically, we do the bring-them-on-out when it's somebody that loses to somebody they're not supposed to. That's going to be one of those games that really determines, are you really that good or not? And then, in my opinion, and you can take that for what it's worth, but if Cincinnati or Notre Dame, either one loses a close ball game, I don't happen to think you drop them that far. I mean, if I'm number 3 and I lose to number 1 by a couple of points, I shouldn't fall that far, because number 1, either you're right about the 1 and the 3 ranking, or you're wrong about it. But in relation to those two teams, what was supposed to happen happened. So if one of those two teams blows it, now it's probably to Cincinnati's advantage when you talk about the haves and the have-not. So if Cincinnati comes in and blows Notre Dame's doors off, we're doing okay. You could make a completely different statement about that game than you could if Notre Dame goes in and blows Cincinnati's doors off. Let me
remind everybody, it's at Notre Dame, which is always a fan, those fans are always a benefit to the home team. But I want to shift gears to the SEC and ask you your thoughts as in closing out our time with you today about Ole Miss versus Alabama at Alabama. That's a number 12 Ole Miss versus the number 1 Alabama. Does Alabama drop if Ole Miss beats them?
Well, everybody was so sure about Alabama, and our surprise poll, Alabama was either 1 or 2 in each poll that was submitted. I think Ole Miss finished 11th in our poll. But after not Alabama expects to go out there and beat everybody to the point where they quit. That's their stick. That's how they want. And if you go back and look at their scores, typically that's how they do. Well, they didn't do that against Florida. So they've got to have a little bit of doubt in their mind. I imagine this has been a rough week of practice for them because Nick Saban doesn't just want to win. He wants to beat the dog snot out of you so that you quit. And then you can hear him sometimes on soundbites. I want them to quit. And when a team doesn't quit, it makes him wonder, is his team as good as he thinks it is? Well, and they may not know. And if Ole Miss is as good as everybody says they are, which I don't happen to believe they are because their quarterback's SEC preseason player of the year, we intercepted him 5 times at Arkansas last year. I'm not sure how much better he got, but I know our defense got a lot better, so it's going to be interesting to see. Again, in Tuscaloosa, though, and I think probably I won't even go into that because you don't have enough show, but might be a mystical flag or two, little mystical flag action flying out. I've seen a lot of pass interference penalties called against Alabama opponents over the years in close ball games. You never know. It happens regardless of whether anybody wants to admit it or not. So it really comes down to if the referees let them play, and if Ole Miss is as good as they think they are, Ole Miss got a chance to win, no doubt. Everybody has a chance to win now. Because I think everybody's kind of building a little bit of depth to be able to do that. And to your point, the transfer portal has helped that, although I can't comment on Ole Miss's transfer, who they got, who they brought in, but I know they've got to be better because everybody is.
Well, Ole Miss, I can tell, I don't remember their names, but they improved on their corners, which is a good thing for them against Alabama, plus they improved on their head coach, who has more than a fair share of understanding of where Nick Saban comes from and what Alabama's all about. So I don't see a lot of quit in Ole Miss. So I expect it to be a very competitive game. Razorback Dave, I thank you so much for your participation. I'm going to wait for the next caller to call in as I transition into questions like, should everybody get a ribbon when they play?
You don't want me on that conversation. Thanks for having me on, Coach. I look forward to doing it again soon.
That's Razorback Dave, everybody. Thank you so much for your time. We'll be waiting for our next caller to pipe in on us and share his insights on what's going on in his world of sports and opinions about the transfer portal. I am very interested to know what Austin Dunstan's frame of reference is on quality of play. Guess what? There he is. This is 360 Performance on KUHSdenver.com. Streaming to you, is this Austin? Austin, it's great to hear from you, buddy. Give my audience a little bit of an idea of the show that you produce on sports information and sports performance. And we find you actually in Fayetteville, Arkansas, right?
Yes, sir. I'm in Fayetteville, Arkansas, pursuing my master's degree. I work for the athletic department up here. And my spare time, I do a show called The Common Fan, which is just a show I do about sport with some of my buddies around, and find out where you stream all your podcasts on every platform. That's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, anywhere you can find a podcast is where you can find us.
So, Austin, my first question for you, and by the way, I'm asking you to stick with me through the rest of the show for the next 30 minutes, if that's okay.
That's perfectly fine with me.
I want to ask you about this transfer portal. Has got a lot of layers to it, and it's benefiting teams noticeably because of the quality of talent they're being able to bring into their systems. But is that system making college football and the athletics look more like a pro system in how they recruit and how they obtain talent?
You know, it's funny you bring that up. I've heard a lot of comparisons of the transfer portal to that of free agency in pro sports, whether that be NBA free agency or NFL free agency, because you see these players that have played at a school for 4 years decide, you know, hey, we're going to graduate and we're going to transfer. Or even now with the one-time transfer rule, you can play and you can, when you transfer, you're immediately eligible. So it's definitely becoming more of a pro-style look as opposed to how it used to be where If you decided you were going to transfer, you'd have to sit out a season. If it was in conference, it was going to have to be 2 seasons. And so now they're just kind of pushing it closer to being that pro style of it's kind of every man for himself.
Well, and I'm glad you said that, because the ease of a transfer now because of the portal is way different than it was in the past. You know, they don't lose eligibility if they make a good choice on that one-time only kind of effort. It's very beneficial. I know that you've already seen through the current season in Arkansas, the 4-0 record they have right now. They've benefited greatly because of the transfer portal. And like any team, they've got to avoid the injury monster, regardless of the talent they have. So I want to direct your attention to the aspects of the transfer portal and what it does for the kind of the entertainment value of the game. And okay, so let's just agree for right now that we have parity, because talent's coming in. The Alabamas don't have a lockdown on playing Memphis and Arkansas or anybody else for that matter, as they typically do in the preseason. They have to be mindful, because if they don't stay sharp, they might lose their edge and actually get beat at a time that they really don't want to face that. So what's the impact of the entertainment value then when we've got these two teams with a pretty good talent pool?
Yeah, it's kind of leveling out the playing field. I mean, you see it this year, especially in Division I FBS football. There's not a team really that stands out as, you have your Alabama, but I mean, even they've proven to be somewhat almost beatable with their 2-point win over Florida. I mean, you see what's happened to Clemson. It's kind of leveling out the playing field. I mean, you see players from smaller schools like I believe Arkansas has a transfer from Illinois State. His name is John Ridgway, and he came over this year as a transfer, and he is an absolute beast. I mean, but it's just kind of helping these players at smaller schools prove that they have the ability to play Power 5 football and have, some immediate attention on these smaller schools, because there's players everywhere that need to be looked at, because they can wind up anywhere at any given point in their career.
Now, as you say that, Austin, I want to ask you about a game in the SEC where I believe that, especially on the defensive back side of things for Ole Miss, they're going to make an impact against Alabama that Alabama perhaps is diminishing a little bit. They're not giving it due respect. And that could be an attitude open door for them to get beat by Ole Miss. What are your thoughts on the Ole Miss-Alabama matchup this weekend?
Well, I mean, like I just said, Alabama has looked beatable in at least that Florida game this year. And, Lane Kiffin always has something up his sleeve for Nick Saban. Last year they had an incredible game, if I remember correctly. Ole Miss's offense looks great. They always put up a lot of points. I think the over in this game is set at 79, which is the largest total points in an Alabama game, I believe, in their history, which is something to think about. But that's one thing about this game is usually there's not a lot of defense played, and that's something that Alabama has to take into consideration, is that maybe that's a focus that Ole Miss has this year. If they play good in the secondary, they have a shot to beat this team because they have such a high-powered offense. They don't have to completely shut out Alabama, and they're not going to. And Alabama doesn't have to shut out Ole Miss, and they're not going to, because both these offenses are pretty high-powered. They've got good quarterback play and excellent skill receivers. So I think it's going to be a good game. I don't know if Ole Miss's defense is great yet. I just remember they were really subpar last year. So it's hard to tell this early in the season if they've made that jump. But I think it's going to be a true test for Alabama either way.
Well, Ole Miss, as I mentioned earlier in the show, they have benefited from the transfer portal at the quarterback and their defensive back lineup. But I don't know that Alabama is going to give them a lot of respect just because of the transfers. But those transfers in the first 4 games of the season have shown their fan base as well as opponents that their defense is a little bit different. And it's not just because of dialing it up emotionally. Physicality is there, execution of the scheme, and as you said, Lane Kiffin is not without a scheme.
Right. Yeah.
So he's at a point in his career as a head coach where he's got to dig deep in his coaching trick bag to not only motivate players but also give them the assurances that the game plan fits the skill set.
Yeah, and Nick Saban is probably the greatest college football coach of all time. So he's seen the film, he's seen the new transfers at Ole Miss, at least on film. So he probably has that in the back of his mind. But in order to make sure that they won't slip up and lose this football game, they're going to have to put an emphasis on that this weekend. And I think you'll probably see that because I've rarely seen a Nick Saban coach team go into a game underprepared. But it's definitely something to think about.
So, Austin, why is transfer parity good for the game?
Well, I think it's good for the game because it gives people that maybe didn't have the looks right out of high school a chance to play Power 5 football or Power 5 basketball, because sometimes there's great talent everywhere. Sometimes people just don't get the looks, and with this transfer rule that you can transfer without sitting out a year and you wouldn't lose any eligibility, it's a chance to essentially treat an FCS or a Group of 5 school as if it were a JUCO. You're facing better competition probably, but I mean you can treat it as that, as a tool to make yourself known across the country. So I think it's really good because you'll see people like Arkansas benefit from an Illinois State player or from a Missouri player, or like Ole Miss. They can go out and look not just in high school for needs that they need now. They can go see somebody that's already developed for 2, 3, 4 years under a collegiate program, and they can go get that as more of a fix it now instead of prepare for the future. So I think it really helps with instantaneous fixing of holes in your team. And now I don't know if a team can just heavily rely on the transfer portal every year and come out successful. However, you've seen success. Let's just use Arkansas for an example. They were recruited pretty well, but their defensive line was not very deep. They didn't have a lot of depth at that position. So what did they do? They went out in the transfer portal and they got 3 transfers that have come in and filled that position. Now, granted, some of them, most of them are graduate transfers and won't be here next year. It's not something that they have to worry about in this last year's recruiting cycle. They can use the 2 players, 3 players that they got from the portal and buy themselves some more time to get some young guys fresh out of high school that they can develop the way they want to.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that last point up, Austin, because now in our world of technology, there are platforms that are listing the transfer players. Who's eligible, who they are, why they're eligible, where they think they want to go. It's almost like a recruiting scouting scheme to show to fans. And I picked up, it's 247 Sports, I think is one of the websites I looked at, and they are listing players from all over the country in college. Now, no one knows whether the players even know that they're getting posted like that, but more than likely these platforms are looking at statistics about, like maybe a freshman or sophomore that's a 5-star or 4-star rated player that got no game time at some of the top conference teams, and they're picking up their pictures, their stats, if they have any, and posting them as a viable transfer portal player. Not that the player even knows that they want to. It's just kind of churning the waters. What do you think about that effort by those unsavories that are kind of stirring the pot to try to raise the awareness to what players are out there and create their own, I don't know what their economic power they're trying to create, but I'm sure there's some merchandising angle that those platforms have for it. I just found that very interesting. Already in existence in a very short time that the transfer portal has been in existence. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, that is really interesting, and the transfer portal does a lot of good things for athletes, does a lot of good things for programs, but at some point we have to look back and see, is it actually hurting some other programs? I mean, because if you think about it, now that there's no penalty for transferring after the first year or any year at all, at least one time, you have to wonder if people are going to start to pull the trigger on the transfer to too quickly. I mean, I was in school as a student athlete. I know plenty of other student athletes. About probably, I would say 75 to 80% of freshmen that are new to a campus, the idea or the thought of transferring crosses their mind. And so some of them will take, some of them will do it, some of them will transfer, and some of them will stick it out. But I think we'll see an increase in the number of students that decide, you know, I don't like it here, there's no penalty, I'm going to transfer. And they're not going to, commitments aren't going to mean as much. Letters of intent aren't going to mean as much. I mean, because you could actually technically sign a letter of intent and quote unquote transfer to another school before you even get on campus. So it's kind of becoming a more complex issue. And so with people, you know, putting up the stats or assuming whether people might want to transfer even before they announce that they intend to do so, could probably even push that even further. So it could get a little ugly for some schools and some programs. I'm sure we'll see stories about that come out soon where somebody signs a letter of intent and then decides, oh, well, I'm actually not going to do this because of that transfer rule.
So let me give you a scenario then. I'm a player that's playing, I got recruited, I'm a freshman, and I'm playing for Penn State. And Penn State is currently ranked early in the season at number 4 in the top 25. I'm not getting any time. I'm not seeing the field other than warming up. And I also know that I'm from the Midwest and would love to get closer to home. So I decide to take a look at Ohio State. And as I'm looking at it, I'm thinking to myself, you know, if I exercise this transfer to Ohio State because they've openly said they have a need for wide receivers, which I'm one, I could build my NIL. My NIL becomes bigger. And I have a greater economic potential by doing this transfer in addition to playing, because I'm not playing at Penn State, but I would play at Ohio State. Do you think that's going to come into the mindset of these kids about their name, image, and label? I'm sorry,
absolutely. I definitely think that's going to be a big factor on whether people transfer or not, especially, you know, you used the example of Penn State to Ohio State, but I mean, what about a guy that's going to Arkansas State?
Yeah.
You know, and he sees that, oh, well, maybe I do have the potential to be a Power 5 wide receiver, and I'm going to get more exposure at the University of Arkansas than I am here at A-State. That's definitely going to play into their decision to transfer. And I think where things are going to get sticky is at what point and you know it's probably already going on, I don't really know, but at some point there's going to be other coaches that reach out to players that aren't playing. So let's say an Ohio State coach would reach out to that Penn State player that's not playing because of this new transfer rule. And I know that's against the rules, but it's probably going to happen. And it's just, at the end of the day, I believe in putting the athletes first and giving them the ability to make their own decision and not penalize them for transferring is a good thing. But I could definitely see coaches or administrators or boosters taking advantage of the situation and trying to persuade an athlete's decision one way or another.
Well, let's expand on that a little bit, Austin, because I'm fairly familiar with the NCAA compliance rule book, and I know that there are certain periods on the calendar that are green, orange, or yellow, depending on your color scheme, and green. Green is when it's open recruiting. I as a coach can call kids up, have a conversation with them. The gold or yellow section is I can make phone calls and maybe send them a letter, but I can't physically see them, and yet they may come to my campus on their own voluntarily, and I might be able to wave hi to them, but I better not talk to them. And then obviously red,
right.
that's a closed time. So I'm thinking, based on your point a minute ago about the transfer portal, that coaches are going to include currently are not playing, but currently on a team in the green periods as a candidate that they can call and go see.
Right.
And I don't think unless they've changed them, I don't think the NCAA rules have something that delineates coaches calling current players at other teams during green recruiting periods. I think they only wrote it for high school kids.
Yeah, see, that's where the gray area comes into play with all this NIL stuff and one-time transfer rules coming into play. I mean, the NCAA compliance is going to have to revisit this situation because somebody's going to have to come out and say, oh, well, this is right, you can do this. Or somebody's going to have to say, oh, this is wrong, you can't do this. But for it to continue to be a gray area is probably not the best look on the NCAA. Unless they, if they want it to be legal, then let it be legal, But I think that's something that they need to come out and make a definitive statement on.
Yeah. So how then has the integrity of the game changed as a result of the transfer rule and its influence on the entertainment value of games? Because now the Gamecocks of South Carolina may be a little bit more entertaining playing Alabama because of the transfers they got than before then. Is that integrity? Are we maintaining the integrity of the game and its entertainment value or not?
I think, in my opinion, yeah, we're maintaining the integrity of the game and the entertainment value because it's leveling out the playing field. And I know that you might say, oh, well, Alabama or Ohio State could go and form a super team and no one else has a chance. They have that opportunity in recruiting anyway. But I think in the long run, it's going to be good for the game because, you're already seeing examples of it this year. It's giving teams an opportunity to fill holes that they need to be filled currently in order to compete with the Alabamas, the Ohio States, the Clemsons of their league. So I think it's really good for the integrity of the game. It really helps these schools that otherwise wouldn't get these big-time recruits. It really helps them be in the mix for getting quality players and being able to compete on the same playing field as the blue ones, if you will.
Yeah. So staying with entertainment value for a little while, do you think that the parity issue and good for the game outcomes are going to have an impact on the economics of the game?
Well, that's a tough question because you have to determine, well, how much does it really affect it currently? The economics of the game, there's a lot more coming into play now with NIL, especially because there's a fine line between NIL and, schools paying their players. I think that economically, I don't know how much it will affect the game currently. I don't see that as an important factor, in my opinion, to the game, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, let me...
No, I don't think it will affect it that much.
Okay, let me ask you this question then, as a poking at you a little bit. So I'm a second string offensive lineman behind the number one who is ranked in the top 10 in the nation as a lineman, and he is a junior, and I'm a freshman, and yet I'm pretty good at what I do, so I'm the number 2 on the depth chart, but because I play on this really stout team, my NIL has gotten some legs to it, which didn't happen before, so that means the bookstore is selling my jersey, my likeness, and my name, which is income and revenue that didn't happen prior to these NIL rules and transfer rules. And then, man, if I get a chance to go to another team and get out from underneath the shadow of my teammate, I could actually increase my NIL by going to a bigger branded team. Would that be something of economic value that we could increase? Or am I kind of spitting in the wind on this one?
No, I see your point, and I get that. But at the end of the day, I think that I don't know what school you use, but I think you just said a stout team. But at the end of the day, let's say I'm that guy and I don't transfer. I think that my revenue is going to, or my value of NIL is going to increase either way. Because if I'm the number 2 guy and he's a junior, that means I'm a true freshman. It means I'll be a redshirt sophomore with 3 years left. When I get to start. So I think that the revenue is going to come either way. Now it's just a matter of, do I want to bring that revenue to this school, or do I want to, transfer over here and get it now? And so and typically, and you gotta also think a place where I would transfer probably has that revenue, probably has a big time offensive lineman, and I would just be filling his shoes to where he's now in the position I was at my old school. So I think in the long run, it'll all just kind of level out, if that makes any sense at all.
No, it does. In fact, I think you're giving a sampling of the rhetoric that's happening in the coaches' meetings on a routine basis about strategy when it comes to recruiting. There's a whole other level of consideration that coaches have to make in order to posture properly, keep their current lineup, those juniors and seniors happy in their position. Because if you transfer in somebody who's got equal to or greater talent, you might be increasing the competitive pool in practice to see who's going to step up, but you also might diminish the competitive pool in practice. So I think I think coaches are faced with some interesting decisions.
Definitely so, and it'll be interesting. I mean, this is the first year of NIL, so it'll be interesting to see how it plays out in the long run, because schools might lose recruits. I mean, you see, so I'm at Arkansas, so I'll use Arkansas as an example. We're going to switch over to basketball, though. I mean, in basketball, we just had the number 6 overall prospect in the 2022 class commit to Arkansas to play basketball, which is a big-time get. It was huge for the program. But there's also 2 other recruits, Jordan Walsh and Anthony Black, that are also 5-stars. And so if we can get them to commit, we'll have 3 5-stars and 4 4-stars in the 2022 class. So at this point, you got to see, well, the limelight is not shared very equally when it comes to athletics. So you begin to wonder, how do I keep these guys on board if, say, Jordan Walsh is getting more media attention than this 4-star that we need, but he could go somewhere else and probably be the star of the team. So that's going to be a new challenge that coaches will have to face, and I'm not really sure what they're going to do to level it out, but it's definitely something that will have to be addressed sooner or later.
So Austin, in closing the show today, what would be one of your takeaways for people that are listening regarding the, it's good for the game, the transfer portal is good for the game, we've got an agreement on that, and I think there's evidence to show that it's happening across the country within conferences and teams. And also reflect on it from your perspective as a collegiate athlete, as though you are a little leaguer again, and you're thinking about the future, and you're seeing all of these changes. Is there a takeaway for younger athletes about this process and how they're going to modify their look at setting up their college aspirations and also perhaps their pros? What's their takeaway?
Well, I mean, I was a baseball player, and if I was in Little League or middle school or even high school, preparing, deciding what I want to do for college, I'm looking at this NIL stuff, and so in baseball, there's not that many scholarships to go around.
Yeah.
So something that might go into the thought of making a decision, well, how profitable can my name, image, and likeness be at this university? Because if I'm getting a 45% scholarship to Vanderbilt, and I can make up for that 55% in scholarship money because I played for the Commodores in my NIL, I'll probably go there. I'll probably go where I'm the most valuable. So that's another thing that, because college football has plenty of scholarships to go around, but baseball and softball and things of that nature don't have as many scholarships. So it's something that can be very persuasive in a decision that a young athlete might have to make.
I'm really grateful for your comments, Austin, because it comes from a genuine place about being an athlete, being in college, watching college athletes perform on a weekly basis now during your master's program. So give us one more shout out about your show. Where can people see it? How can they get in touch with you before we close out for the day?
Yeah, so my show is called The Common Fan. It's a sports show that I do with all my buddies. You can find it anywhere. We have a YouTube channel. We have a Twitter, just The Common Fan. We have an Instagram, The Common Fan Official. You can DM us on there if you want to get in contact with us. And I'd just like to thank you for having me on the show today. I had a great time.
Austin, it's always a pleasure. You bring a great insight and attitude to the show and our content. I'll be talking at you later, my friend. Bye-bye.
Yes, sir. You have a good one.
All right, everybody, we're closing out the show for today. Grateful to Razorback Dave and Austin Dunston for their contribution about what we're talking about today is the transfer portal and what's going on, but let me leave you with this. The podcast moment is here, and even this show, as live as we are, we're going to repost this on our podcast platforms. If you look at Spotify, Apple, or Google, just type in 360 Performance and you'll find our show. And this show, in fact, will be posted over the weekend, so get involved. Be part of the process with us and learning more about what's out there so that you can make plans that take action for the purposes and priorities that you make for them. I am Dr. Lowell Whiteman, or Coach, saying have a great day and catch us on KUHSdenver.com, streaming to you every week.